Welcome everybody to today's meeting of the Cabinet, both those that are participating and those who are watching on the live stream. If members have technical difficulties during the meeting, then please contact the Democratic Services Officer on call, who will attempt to assist you. And today's Democratic Services Officer is Charlotte Crowley, and her number is 577193. It'll also be at the top of the chat thread for members to read, for members if you need it. For those of you who are watching by the Council's YouTube screen, please follow the instructions below the video if there are any issues with the live feed. I'd ask participants that when you're not speaking, please to mute your microphone. This minimises background noise and will help everyone in listening to the proceedings. Microphones must only be on if the participant has been granted permission to speak. To gain my permission to speak, please very briefly indicate on the chat to the right of the side of the screen, and I will make a note and get back to you once the person speaking is finished. Obviously, we're all getting used to these arrangements, but please note that we'll be following the usual Cabinet protocols in which other members of the Council usually only speak once on each item. Would everyone please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent, they're not used to make or receive calls while the meeting's in progress. Please also refrain from checking emails or conducting other business, and ensure that you're in a quiet room free from distractions for the duration of the meeting. Please note the meeting's being live streamed for members of the public. It will also be recorded and will be subsequently available on the internet. So first of all, can I ask the members of Cabinet to confirm that they're present in the meeting when I read out their name? I'll then ask for the attendance of those councillors who are participating in order to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1 separately. So Councillor Whitehead.
Present.
Councillor Alban.
Yeah, here.
Councillor Duckworth.
Here.
And Councillor Yates.
Yep, present.
Thank you. The following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. So when I say your name, please confirm that you're present in the meeting. Item 4, Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, here, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Game.
Present.
Item 5, Councillor Ashby.
Present.
Item 6, Councillor Rogers.
Present.
Thank you. Item 7, Councillor Hart.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Towning.
Present.
Thank you. Item 8, Councillor Garner.
I'm here.
Councillor Game we've already heard from, but she's asked to speak on that item, and Councillor Pugh. No Councillor Pugh? Okay. So Councillor Pugh doesn't appear to be here at the moment. We'll see whether he's here when we get to item 8. Are there any other councillors present who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1? Silence, so we should assume there aren't. There are no apologies for absence because all of Cabinet are here. Does anyone have an interest to declare in the items of business on the agenda this evening? There's no response, so I assume that's a no. We move on to item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting, to approve the summary of recommendations and decisions of the Cabinet meeting held on the 23rd of April 2020. I'll propose the minutes. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second them.
Seconded by Councillor Duckworth. Unless I hear any objection, I will take those minutes as approved. Objection came there, none. So we should take those as approved, and we'll move on to item 4, which is the Thanet Local Plan, Inspector's Report and Adoption. I shall find the right document to talk about that. So this is the second visit of the Thanet Local Plan in its latest form to Cabinet. And we're now moving into the very final stage, hopefully, of adopting it. The plan is part of the Council's policy framework and therefore has to be adopted by a meeting of the full Council, and it is scheduled to go to full Council on the 9th of July. A brief reprise on where we've been. The draft local plan was submitted for independent examination in October 2018. Hearings commenced on the 2nd of April 2019 and finished on the 18th of July 2019. Following the examination, the planning inspectors recommended a number of modifications to the draft plan, and these proposed modifications were subject to a public consultation. The inspectors have now considered the representations made during the consultation and submitted their report to the Council, which is attached to the report Annex 1. Inspectors are required to make a judgment about the soundness of the draft plan. The overall conclusion of their report is that the draft plan is sound, subject to the adoption of the modifications recommended within their report, and the modifications are attached to Annex 2. The final draft of the local plan, incorporating the inspector's recommended modifications, is attached to this report, Annex 3. This report recommends that the modified local plan be recommended to full council for adoption, as indeed it was when we last met on April the 23rd. And the report also recommends that the landscape character assessment be adopted as a supplementary planning document. So we, Cabinet, recommended the revised plan and the landscape character assessment the last time we met, but part of the process of governance is it goes to overview and scrutiny for consideration. And I think Councillor Bafer's going to talk to us about what overview and scrutiny reported back on that, and I will respond to those points, but I don't think they'll affect the plan as it's put forward. So at this stage, I'm going to move the recommendations in the report. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second.
Seconded by Councillor Yates. And I've got a call on Councillor Bayford, please.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. You can hear me, can you?
Here.
Excellent. Good. Yes, as you rightly say, this came to overview and scrutiny. It came actually on the 26th of May. And when we were looking forward to that meeting, it was a bit of a shaker to realise that this was the culmination of a process that had started in 2009. So over 10 years in the making. And I became aware that some of us had been around a long time, so probably know more about local plan than it's good for any person other than a planner to know about it. But that there were a lot of members that perhaps weren't familiar with what was going on. And that thought process was heightened, if you like, or highlighted the need to take some sort of action when rumours started circulating that, in fact, at overview and scrutiny, we could rewrite the local plan. Now, that clearly wasn't something that we could do, and I felt that members needed to have some sort of comfort about what they could and couldn't do. And to that end, I asked Adrian Verrill to produce a briefing document. He did so. He put the local plan and the process into some kind of context. He went into some detail about the history, some of the issues that were important to the local plan, and perhaps more importantly, clarified why it was important that we had a local plan that was current. Our current one being, the one we're using at the moment, being significantly out of date, and to point out the implications of not having a plan. That briefing document I would commend to all members of the council to read before the council meeting, because it covers an awful lot of the points that are really important. I think it has to be said that members probably felt a little bit frustrated about the limited action that was available to us. And it's fair to say that I think we took an awful lot of comfort in the fact that there will have to be a review within 6 months of the local plan being adopted, so that any points that were current in the plan that members were unhappy about, they could actually make representation at that point. There was a good debate about the local plan at the meeting, and amongst the points that were raised by members that they're asking Cabinet or indeed the working party to look at the review to consider was whether the Climate Emergency Working Group and the Local Plan Review Cabinet Advisory Group could work collaboratively so that issues that may emerge from the working group could be perhaps incorporated in the revised local plan when it comes to review. There was concern that there were green infrastructure projects that perhaps had been missed out, and there was a request for those to be looked at. Dane Valley Woods was cited as a case in point. There was some concern about the way the port was represented in the local plan, and there was a suggestion that there should be more consideration given to what part of the economic development of Thanet could be affected by the port. There was a suggestion that employment and community wealth creation should be highlighted in the new plan. It was made clear that there was some concern about the fact that the draft plan was developed well before COVID-19 hit us. And there was questions as to how flexible the new plan would be to address the challenges that might be posed in the post-COVID world, or the new normal, as people talk about. There were some concerns as to whether the delayed decision regarding Manston Airport could affect the plan. There was a note that potential agricultural land would be lost through the current proposals in the plan, and the question was asked that if brownfields became available in the future, could these be used to replace the greenfield sites that were currently being proposed? There was a question as to whether the plan could be reviewed earlier than the 6 months. I'm not quite sure what the point of that was, but one of the members was concerned about that. And a question about how sort of planning applications that might fall between the two, how they might be considered. So the upshot was that in the end, panel members agreed that, subject to noting the comments that I've just made that have been passed on to Cabinet, that the panel recommends that the local plan proposals and the inspector's main modifications be forwarded to Cabinet and then to Council for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. I don't propose to pick up the points that overview and scrutiny raised, because, as you've said, they can't be incorporated into the plan that we're referring to Council. But I think you should take it as read that Cabinet has heard what scrutiny members said, and we understand the concerns that were expressed, and certainly we'll be looking at a number of those issues in the review process. I think some quite comprehensive answers were given at overview and scrutiny by Mr. Verrill, which are in the minutes. But I'll let Mr. Verrill come in at a later point, and if he's got anything to add, then he can. Yeah, so I think we welcome and thank scrutiny for the comments that they made, and I would share the frustration, frankly, of some of the members that we're being asked to adopt a document which hasn't really even been adopted by the Council since 2018. Different members of the Council and the world has moved on since then. But as you've so eloquently explained, that is the planning process. I'm not sure if you were actually the only member of the Council who was on the Council at the time when the process started. I'm trying to struggle to think who else might have been on the Council in 2009. But,
possibly Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, no, he probably would have been, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I think we share the pain.
And he's played an active part in the planning system over the intervening years.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll give Mr. Verrill an opportunity to comment, but I'll bring in Councillor Game to have her say first.
Thank you, Chair. I think that Councillor Bayford, with your response, have covered most of what I was going to say about the plan. I would just reiterate what Councillor Bayford said. We need a sound local plan. This has got to be in place. There are doubts, as Councillor Bayford said. There is a 6-month review, so those who do doubt it can bear that in mind. But if we don't have a sound local plan and it's not adopted, the risk is just too great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Game. I think we do have political unanimity on that, certainly across the two major groups on the Council, and I would hope the other groups, because clearly it would be a very strange situation if we were to reject this opportunity to adopt a local plan. I just asked Mr. Verrill if he wants to come in and make any comments on what's been said.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think I can really add anything to what's already been said by yourself and the other members, so I won't add anything unless anyone wants a particular point answered. Thank you.
Well, I didn't want you to feel that we weren't calling on your expertise, Mr. Verrill, but as you say, I think we've covered this territory a number of times already in different meetings, and no doubt we'll cover it again at full Council on July the 9th. So Cabinet's been asked to recommend to Council to adopt the Thanet local plan subject to the modifications set out in the inspector's report and adopt the landscape character assessment as a supplementary planning document. That's been moved and seconded. Unless I hear an objection, I'll take these as recommended to Council. And there are no objections, so we'll take that as been adopted. The recommendation's been adopted. And we move on to item 5, which is the East Kent housing transition costs. And I call on Councillor Whitehead.
Good evening, all. Just checking I've actually managed to switch my microphone on.
We can hear.
Would you like me to start by reading the recommendations or go straight into the introduction?
Entirely up to you, Councillor Whitehead.
Okay. Recommendations as they stand. Cabinet is asked to approve a 2020 to 21 only supplementary HRA revenue budget of £187,000 for the transition of the single housing management system to TDC in-house management to be funded from HRA balances, and approve a recurring 2020 to 21 supplementary HRA revenue budget of £82,000 for the ongoing maintenance and support of the housing management system, to be funded from HRA balances in 2020 to 21 and incorporated into the budget setting process for 2021 to 22 and beyond. And the reasons for this are as follows. Last October, Cabinet agreed to bring in-house the management of the housing service. Currently, Thanet's housing management service is provided by East Kent Housing, who provide the same service to 3 other East Kent districts. All 4 districts agreed to end the management agreement. On the 17th of February, Cabinet received a report that delegated authority to the Deputy Chief Executive and Section 151 officer to incur costs of up to £250,000 in respect of the transfer. This report explains the background and justification as to why this delegation needs to be extended as a result of the costs of transferring the IT system from East Kent Housing to the 4 districts, including Thanet. East Kent Housing operate a Northgate housing system. They have been implementing the system for a considerable time, with cost and time overruns. The implementation of the system still needs to be completed before it can be broken up into 4 separate systems. Northgate runs on a server which has reached the end of its useful life. Coupled with this council's desire to move such systems to a cloud environment, now would be the time to make the switch. The version of Northgate being used by East Kent Housing is out of date and needs to be brought up to date as well as moved to the cloud. Various options have been considered by this and by the other councils. We have agreed that the best option is to finish the original implementation, move it to the cloud, separate the system and database into 4, and bring it up into its latest version. This is an expensive and complex task, and the estimated costs are provided in the report. These costs will exceed the £250,000 delegated authority, so the report is seeking a separate decision. In bringing our housing back in-house, we have a chance to create a service for our tenants that exemplifies best practice across all areas. But to do so, we need to provide a secure base to operate from in terms of system management. I move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead, and I'll second that motion. And we'll call upon Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Leader. Having studied the report, I must commend the author for the clear and precise explanation of what is a very complex project. Clearly, option 1, to lift and shift the single system into a cloud environment and divide the database into each of the council's own software, is the logical way forward. The digital aspect, which will allow our tenants to be able to obtain online information through the My Account application of their tenancy and maintenance details, is a massive move forward and will drastically improve the communication process. I'd just like it confirmed that the one-off costs of £17,000 cloud move and the £170,000 for the system split is an equal split of the total amount across all 4 councils. Also, the ongoing support cost of £82,000 is a substantial increase from the previous £53,000. Please could you explain what this is in respect of, and are there any elements that could be supported by our own in-house ICT? Lastly, in 2.2 of the report, it states that the document management system module for TDC is still awaiting deployment. Will this module still be required? If so, will it be at an additional cost for the future, or was it included in the previous payments? Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. That sounds like one for the officers, unless Councillor Whitehead's desperate to answer the technical questions. Does Mr. Willis or Mr. Porter want to answer that?
Yes, I'll have a go answering that one. Thank you, Chair. First of all, the costs are shared equally across the 4 councils. We're just picking up a quarter share, and they're the figures that are reflected in the report. On the 82,000 annual maintenance cost, we couldn't reduce the fee by carrying out any of that work ourselves. It's not in the nature of the what we're paying the 82,000 for. In terms of sort of value for money, I mean, we haven't gone out to the market for a fresh procurement, that would have been a very major decision involving even higher costs and an even longer time frame. But because we're novating the contract, what we have done is carried out some soft market testing, and that demonstrates that Northgate is competitive. We did shave a little off the annual maintenance cost to arrive at the 82 per council. And the 82 compared to the 53 that we currently have in the budget isn't a great like-for-like comparison. The 53k that we were paying that was in the budget is for an outdated system that hasn't been upgraded for a long time, and the 82k will buy us cloud hosting, so we won't have to be running it on a server, and it includes future upgrades to the system upgrades. Document management system, yes, that is true. That has not been implemented yet. We plan to implement it. We do already hold the license for it. We just need to get around to implementing it. And it's a good example, along with things like My Account, that we can start progressing and prioritising once we've got direct control of the system ourselves. That was it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Does any other member of Cabinet have any comment that they wish to make on this item? I'm not seeing any. Okay, so it's been the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Unless I hear any objection, I'll take this proposal as approved. And I hear no objection. So we move on to item 6, which is the tenant and leaseholder health and safety policies, and we return to Councillor Whitehead.
Hello again. The recommendations for this item are as follows. That Cabinet agree to adopt the proposed compliance policies as detailed in Annexes 1 through to 6. Secondly, delegate authority to the Head of Housing and Planning in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Housing and Safe Neighbourhoods to make minor operational changes to the policies as required. And thirdly, formally review the policies every 2 years. The reasons are as follows. As a landlord, the Council has a statutory duty to comply with relevant legislation to protect the health and safety of its tenants and leaseholders. The policies recommended cover the 6 principal areas of health and safety compliance, where the Council is required to have an adopted policy for the management of asbestos, water hygiene, fire safety, passenger lifts, gas, and finally, electrical safety. It is recommended best practice that these policies are reviewed regularly, and the report has recommended a formal review every 2 years. The policies have been prepared to be ready for the launch of the Council new in-house tenant and leaseholder service on the 1st of October 2020. East Kent Housing have been consulted in the preparation of these policies and will be required to deliver services in line with these policies during the intervening period. These policies recognise both our own statutory obligations as landlord and encompass best practice in terms of our own acknowledged responsibility. I move the recommendations of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. I'll second that, and I'll bring in Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Leader. Please could you explain why the review will be held every 2 years rather than annually? As policies change on a regular basis, would it not make sense to review every year, particularly as we're now taking this in-house? Thank you.
Okay. Who'd like to respond on that? Councillor Whitehead, do you have any comment on it?
In terms of the drafting, legislation-wise, I know things go from between 1 year through to 5 years, but I'm happy to refer to Mr. Porter in relation to the 2-year renewal.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Well, I think there's two things really. It's clearly at the discretion of the council, the policy that we want to set in respect of reviewing policies. There is a significant amount of work involved in reviewing and preparing policies that of this nature, we employed consultants to advise us about the industry best practice and legislation about the requirement to hold and review policies, and their advice was 2 years, and based on the amount of work involved, I think that's the recommendation as well. clearly we could do it annually, but it would create a significantly more work to do that, and potentially some cost implication. We're obviously launching the new service in October, and it will need some time to establish and bed in. And during the first year, we're anticipating a period of consolidation and improvement. And in my view, I don't think we would be ready to prepare a comprehensive policy review after only 12 months of operation, which is why we've recommended 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Can I just ask then, I mean, obviously, there could be specific changes in legislation or specific events, and we might identify sufficient shortcomings in the policies as a result of external changes. So presumably there's nothing to stop the council, if they wanted to make a specific change at a specific time, bringing that policy back and changing it, is there? They wouldn't have to wait for the review of all the policies.
No, absolutely not. If at any point there's a change in legislation, change in requirements, we can bring something back ahead of schedule. The recommendation for 2 years is that we don't leave it longer than 2 years. So it's a long stop date, effectively, with a requirement that we must review and readopt the policies within 2 years at the most. But if something changes and we need to look at it sooner, we clearly can.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other member of Cabinet want to comment on this item? Doesn't appear so. Councillor Whitehead, have you said what you need to say?
Yes, thank you very much, all.
Okay, well, it's been moved and seconded, so unless I hear any objection, I'll take the recommendation as approved. And there are no objections. So we move on to item 7, which is the procurement of 11 new refuse collection freighters. And it's time for Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll do it the other way around from Helen. This report is in relation to the vehicle replacement programme for refuse freighters. The 2020-21 capital programme includes provision for the replacement of a substantial proportion of the council's refuse vehicle fleet. In accordance with the Constitution, this report seeks approval of a key decision to commit £2.2 million of the budget allocation for the purchase of 11 26-tonne freighters. The council operates an in-house waste and recycling service. A comprehensive vehicle replacement programme is necessary in order for the council to meet statutory obligations in terms of the collection of household waste, as required by the Environmental Protection Act 1990. The expected economic lifespan of a refuse collection vehicle is 7 years. This is because of the heavy nature of the work and type of load the vehicles carry. The vehicles to be replaced were purchased in 2013. These vehicles can no longer be economically maintained, and it would quite simply leave the council unable to deliver a full household waste service if they are not replaced. Options for leasing were explored before the current capital programme was approved. However, this has a far higher cost and offers less flexibility to Thanet District Council as the end user. There is a long lead-in period of 40 weeks to get in the vehicles. It is therefore important that this decision is approved. Refuse vehicles are built to order, and you can't just get them off the shelf effectively. The lead-in period has increased significantly due to the COVID pandemic. The new open back vehicles have a load capacity of 10 tonnes. Our current vehicles carry approximately 6 tonnes. This will reduce trips to the disposal sites. The new vehicles are all open backed, which improves resilience. and also the whole fleet will be interchangeable. 6 of the 11 vehicles to be replaced required extensive body refurbishments 18 months ago. Those vehicles are now suffering similar problems again. This issue will need to be addressed before a new fleet is delivered, and officers are considering interim options. It is imperative the new vehicles are ordered now to reduce the duration and costs of any interim measures and to protect the resilience of the service. I therefore recommend to Cabinet approve option 1 of the report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're moving that, are you?
I am moving that, Chair, yes.
In that case, I'll second it. Thank you, Councillor Alban. And we're bringing Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Steve, very kind of you for that eloquent chat on that subject. 2 councils are trialling electric refuse collection vehicles, or RCVs as they're called, Sheffield and Westminster, with Westminster now going fully electric, so they obviously work. With regards to financial costs, the lower capital cost of a diesel RCV would be largely offset by the lower running cost of an electric RCV, although the total cost of ownership of an ERCV is £29,608 greater than that of a diesel equivalent. The ERCV's saving would be £12,364 if the monetarised impact of carbon emissions is included in the real terms of a carbon savings of approximately 250 plastic bottles per person per year. Surely a good argument for electric RCVs. Maybe as a council we should be trialling the ERCV from the company you are looking to purchase the RCVs from before agreeing to buy diesel wagons. Have you any comment on that, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. I suspect we're going to hear about the practicalities of using these electric vehicles in the streets of Thanet. Do you want to comment, Councillor Alban, or shall we?
Yeah, I'm just to come back to Councillor Hart. This was raised at the members' briefing yesterday, and I'm very open for trialling a vehicle if we can get that an electric vehicle, if we can get the company to agree a short-term use, just to trial it out to see how it goes. But that's as far as I'm going to answer that. It may be Gavin Waite can answer anything else. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Chair, I can obviously from the briefing as well. It's not proven technology at this moment in time, and when you're considering the cost is well over £200,000 per vehicle, it's not a very prudent measure to be buying vehicles that aren't proven technology. I'm quite sure when we've gone through the 7-year cycle of these vehicles, in 7 years, the technology might have been proven enough that actually we'd have the confidence to buy a new fleet that is electric. But at this moment in time, there's nobody using that type of vehicle extensively anywhere in the world, as far as I'm aware. In terms of we know that the manufacturers that we're going to purchase the vehicles from does have an electric vehicle, so we are willing to obviously speak to them and see if we can get one on trial and give it a go and see how effective it is.
Thank you, Mr. White. I'm sure.
Sorry, can I just come back on that? So,
well, okay.
It's only that two Sheffield and Westminster have been trialling since 2018, and I don't know if you've been in contact with them, but Westminster are now going fully electric, so they obviously do work. It's just whether we want to take part in this future venture and try and save the world, really.
Well, I would say the company that run that, so it's not in both those Westminster and Sheffield are run by an external company, so obviously it's the company. They're taking the risk in purchasing their vehicles, and it must be them that are confident that they can deliver that service. But obviously, the risk is ours in terms of purchasing these vehicles. So obviously, we'll go for the safer option of the diesel vehicles at this moment in time.
I suspect that, I know that Westminster and Sheffield are also substantially larger and wealthier authorities than Thanet. So whether or not they're bearing the risk, they would be able to take risks themselves that Thanet perhaps can't do. But I'm sure this administration would, if we felt it was practical, will be the first to embrace electric vehicles in this service, because it's something we're very, very keen on as a group, and I'm sure the councillors as a whole. Can I bring in Councillor Towning, please?
Thank you, Leader. You there?
Yes. Go ahead, Councillor.
Councillor Alban, you're the portfolio holder of this particular service, and so you would have been party to the setting up of the tender document that was given to Dennis Eagle, who are the eventual manufacturers for our vehicles. Would you be good enough to tell us the cost of each vehicle, inclusive of VAT or exclusive of VAT? And could you tell me when the delivery date will actually be? I mean, you've mentioned there is a delay, but what is this current situation, please? Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that, Councillor Alban? It sounds a bit like quiz time, really.
Chair, I think the service can answer that, because we've done some work, because actually the cost of the vehicles is increased due to inflationary pressures. So I'm sure Mike Humber can answer that.
Yeah, I'm sure we can provide that information. Can't we? Yeah.
Okay. Well, if it's okay, I can answer that quickly. So the cost of each vehicle is £195,929.
With or without VAT, Mr. Humber?
That's excluding VAT, sorry.
Thank you. And when do you expect to receive them if we order them now?
Sorry, okay, yeah. 11 units, and they will be delivered in phases of sort of 2 or 3 units at a time, starting. So if we order them now, it would be between February and April next year.
Okay, thank you. Right, does any member of Cabinet have any comment to make on this item? Doesn't appear so. So it's been moved and seconded, and I intend to take that as approved unless I hear any objection, which I don't. So we move on to item 8. Thanks to the officers for their responses to the last one. Supporting our community's Thanet District Council's plan for recovery. And this is me. So, since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in March, the council has obviously been busy responding to the crisis. And now, as the number of cases nationally continues to fall, the government is taking steps to slowly ease the restrictions in place. And as a council, we also need to move forward and move both the authority and the district towards recovery. We will now be working simultaneously on the recovery and continuing the response phase. And there's also the potential of a return to response at any time if there's a second wave of infections. There's also the likelihood that the recovery will span other emergency planning events, including the end of the Brexit transition phase, and that for much of it, staff and partners will be working remotely. Finally, the sheer scale and breadth of the social and economic impacts on the district means that we will be entering uncharted territory, and it's hard to predict where we will end up. So as part of this work, we put together a document supporting our community's TDC's plan for recovery, and this is a high-level outline of the steps that we will take to manage our recovery. Its focus is around community and organisational leadership, and the terms of reference have been developed for each work stream and are attached as annexes to the report, as well as the reopening of the High Street and beach management action plans. Inevitably, these plans need to adapt what will be constantly changing circumstances and risks and opportunities as they arrive. And I do want to take this opportunity to thank all the officers who've been involved in this process, because I'm really proud of the way our officers have responded to this crisis and the work they've done and the service that they've delivered to the residents of Thanet. And I hope that the whole council is appreciative of the hard work that's gone on here, because I think the council has really risen to the occasion. We've also tried to be as collaborative as possible in terms of the recovery. So we've been talking to the town councils and Birchington Parish Council, and we've been engaging with other elected members, both through the group leaders meetings and through the fortnightly briefings, which I know both members and officers value, and which I hope is giving all members a sense of engagement at a time when we haven't been able to meet face-to-face as a council for a period of months. And I will say that the feedback that we get in those briefings has been very helpful in understanding our shaping of the crisis, and what we need to do. And I'm keen that we continue the briefings and we continue that level of engagement with members right across the council, because I think it's been really useful. And I know officers feel that as well. So I'm moving the recommendation, which is that the Cabinet notes the proposal. It doesn't really need to come here. We brought it here because we thought it should be subject to democratic scrutiny. There should be a public-facing document that people can see. Do I have a seconder for noting the report?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. That's Councillor Alban. And I've got a number of speakers. I've got Councillor Garner, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, well, I'd firstly like to echo your comments about the members' briefings and how useful they've been, and also echo your comments and thanks to the council officers and the council, how we've responded to the crisis. It's been great, because one of the impacts that this crisis has had is the financial impact. It's cost, as I see in the report, currently £4 million. And I note in the one of the financial documents, the review of the capital programme, which I know Mr. Willis updated us on at the last couple of member briefings. And I just wondered if it would be possible to get an update on how that is progressing, and also whether included in that review, I think one of the largest items that we've got committed to spend is £2 million on the proposed new Thanet Parkway station, and whether we've been in discussions with Kent County Council on that yet, whether the viability for that station is still the same, and whether we're likely to consider withdrawing our £2 million contribution to that to help towards more towards Thanet's financial recovery itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. I mean, the short answer to your point on the Parkway station is that the council is committed to spending that money, to contributing that money to the scheme. So the current state of affairs is that the scheme continues and is due to go to planning. There's a formal consultation out on some small design changes that have been made. But obviously we continue to talk to Kent County Council. In terms of the financial review, Mr. Willis can expand on this, I think, but we are proposing to bring a budget report to Cabinet on July the 30th, at which all that information will become clear. I think at the moment, the finance team, I mean, Mr. Willis will correct me if I'm wrong, been quite busy dealing with the discretionary grants. Do you want to say anything on that, Mr. Willis?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as regards to financial recovery, right now we're still looking at the impact of COVID-19 on our budgets and finances this year, and the reports that will be going, both General Fund and HRA, that will be going to Cabinet at the end of July, will be dealing with this year's budget position. It will include the capital programme for this year, which understandably has suffered a huge amount of slippage already. There may be opportunities to redirect some capital projects that were otherwise going to start this year, but the general, more comprehensive review of the capital programme, which is a 4-year programme effectively, I'm looking at the 2021 to 25 capital programme. That's part of the budget process for 21-22, which we will be starting in the autumn. So there's a bit of a longer lead-in time for the comprehensive review of the capital programme, but we will be looking at this year's capital programme as part of the reports to Cabinet at the end of July.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Game?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. First of all, on behalf of my group, can I also add our thanks to all the staff and all the key workers. I think they've done an absolutely brilliant job and they've worked so hard, and they really do deserve our thanks. On the plan, there are an awful lot of words, 44 pages. And I was just thinking going forward, it might be easier if we draw out some of the action points and actually have an action plan running alongside it, so it's clearer to understand where the actual actions are as opposed to the detail. One thing that does concern me on the draft cabinet report, safely reopening high street safely, fund action plan, page 493.5, project delivery and next steps. In the third paragraph, it says delivery of the recovery programme will be officer-led, which doesn't really sit very comfortably, because, I mean, there has been lots of criticism from the public too often that the council is officer-led, and really it should be member-led, or member-led with the advice of the officers, or officer and member-led. I just think that that is very misleading. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure the Chief Executive will want to come in on that, but I would say that it's really the difference between policy and operation, because delivery is always going to be led by officers, because we're just not equipped. You know, you and I could get out there with a broom, but I think in the real world we need the officers to deliver the services for us. Chief Executive, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, first of all, can I just say thank you, Councillor Game, for the recognition of the staff's hard work, and from you, Leader. I think, you know, they do appreciate that kind of commentary and feedback, so that is appreciated. On the yes, I accept, Councillor Game, that perhaps I can review the wording. I can see that why you might have interpreted it that way, but the Leader's correct. That's the intention of that, is about delivery, operational activity, and our ability to respond quickly to changes that come up. But I'm happy to review it to perhaps make it clearer that that's the intention. The intention absolutely categorically is not to exclude members from the process at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, yeah, I have a few questions, particularly on economic recovery and the High Street Fund. So I'll do them all in one go and everything, and hopefully I don't lose you all along the way in a long sweeping monologue. But yeah, particularly on the economic recovery, particularly, you know, this lockdown and the pandemic is unlike anything that any of us have ever seen, and of course it's going to be important for us as a council, for residents and for businesses to adapt and to be able to support all of our local small businesses as much as we can. And I commend the council for that. But particularly, one of my questions is how long will the support continue on for? Particularly with the small businesses in our communities, I have a feeling that the issues that we've had with the lockdown and how businesses and communities have been impacted, you know, is going to carry on for quite some time, really. And I think, you know, if we're only looking at a programme of, you know, 3, 6 months, 12 months in the long term, I hope that we can look at that more realistically, particularly over the next 2-3 years, and the support that our communities will need. Also, as well, I'd be intrigued to know how closely we're going to be working with the County Council, particularly on economic development and driving forward, because of course they still have quite a vital role to play, particularly in working with us in doing that. So I think it's incredibly important that we work side by side with them. Also, as well, I'm intrigued to know how much contact we've had with central government, particularly to do with our economic recovery in the department. A couple of years ago, I think it was a Lords committee came down and viewed Margate in particular as kind of a shining example of regeneration in our kind of coastal communities. And I'd be intrigued to know what the council has done to kind of signpost that to central government and the department, and kind of show us as a case for, you know, as an exceptional case in the support that we need in kind of reinvigorating places such as Margate and Ramsgate and Broadstairs, but also as well driving forward that change that we want to see within the towns. And then going on to the High Street Fund, reopening High Street Fund. I understand that we're limited by funds and the funding that we've been given for this and that has been allocated to it. But particularly the main high streets that are going to be reopened, I completely understand that. But, you know, is this going to be in one block funding, or is it going to be kind of staggered to kind of help kind of stretch out the kind of impact that it could have for reopening the high streets? Because some businesses may not be able to reopen as soon as possible. And of course, going to have to follow government guidance and advice. And also as well, I understand that we're targeting it more at the main kind of high street centres. But I think we're really missing a trick here with the smaller kind of shopping centres, particularly areas, particularly Minster St Peter's and Westbrook. I know there's a few others that have been named on there. But I think particularly for elderly and vulnerable residents across the district, not just in my ward, but across the district, a lot of them use places like St Peter's and Minster for their kind of little shopping and stuff like that. And very regularly will they venture further out to the main high streets and the shopping centres. And I think that we're missing a trick there in supporting them.
Thank you, Councillor Pugh. I'll deal with some of those points and then I'll bring in officers. I think in terms of supporting businesses away from the High Street Fund, yes, the council will obviously do what it can to support businesses, and in particular by creating the right environment for them. But I think the real question is for the Chancellor, probably rather than for us, because those businesses, I think some of them are probably hanging on because of the business grants they've had from central government. And if central government support falls off a cliff, and one can well understand that central government can't keep pumping money into the economy, then that is going to be the biggest factor in whether our businesses survive and thrive. But Thanet will be doing what it can. In terms of the county council, well, obviously we do talk to the county council, and the chief executive will expand on that. But I can tell you that I was in a meeting this morning with Mike Whiting, and we were talking very specifically about some potential developments in Thanet, which will be exciting, which you can't go into. But so we are liaising with KCC. In terms of national government and telling the story, well, there is a job there for the two MPs for Thanet. And the chief exec and I and Tim Willis have been speaking to them on a weekly basis, and I think that's been constructive. I mean, obviously I have my differences with them politically, but I think that, they would agree that those meetings have been constructive. We've been able to share information, and we've encouraged them to take the message back from Thanet to central government about what we need, and hopefully they'll be doing that. But certainly that's been a positive relationship. I think it's been something. Another thing that's come out of the pandemic. I mean, instead of meeting the two MPs every 3 months or whatever, we've been meeting them on a weekly basis, and that's been useful in terms of understanding each other apart from anything else. And it's in terms of the High Street, the 126,000. I think one of the problems is that the advice from government was quite prescriptive, and it didn't actually arrive very early. But it isn't a huge amount of money. So if we spread it too thinly, there's danger of it having, no effect at all. But I'm certainly mindful of, I know Minster very well. I'm mindful of Minster and one or two other shopping centres. But I think we've got to be careful that we get the maximum value for the money that we have got available. And unfortunately, there are some quite strict limitations as to what we can spend it on. Chief Executive, do you want to come in?
I think that was quite a good summary. I will just add a couple of points, if I may. Just to go back to actually Councillor Games' point about action plans, I just want to reassure you we do have some detailed operational plans that are supporting our recovery activity. So just to provide some reassurance about that we're using as a working tool for officers to actually progress things and monitor and evaluate our progress against that. In respect of Councillor Pugh's questions, I just wanted to add a couple of things. Obviously, the economic recovery, totally accept that this is a long-term, not just a short-term activity. I think our recovery plan by its nature is inevitably has short, medium, long-term aspirations in it. So just to provide reassurance that obviously we'll be continuing to support businesses and the economy both over the short and medium term. We are working very closely with KCC, which you would absolutely expect us to do, because clearly KCC have a clear role around strategic economic activity. Our relationship is very good with KCC, particularly around the economy, I would suggest. Clearly, they have strong relationships with Locating Kent, which is important to us around helping to encourage investment into the area. We are also feeding into, through Kent Chiefs, we have access to KCC's economic recovery cell. And Kent Chiefs regularly discuss the economy and our approaches to that. Central government, absolutely, as I said, we are continuing to update the MPs. We're also, as you will recall, part of the town deal and Ramsgate High Street funding, which clearly are central government linked. We do have a positive relationship with government departments, including a relationship that I have directly with a senior member within MHCLG, so we are in regular contact with central government. But it's a useful point. Could we do more? It's worth thinking about. Maybe we could attempt to organise a discussion in due course when things have calmed down a bit about how we can continue to work with central government around some of the funding and activities. We're also looking to engage with our colleagues within East Kent around some of the Freeport consultation that's going on and opportunities that might provide. We are part of the East Kent Growth Strategy Growth Board, which again is with our East Kent colleagues. So there is an awful lot going on around High Speed 1, the Parkway Station, all of the assets that we have in East Kent and how we pull them together and make much more sense. We're working very closely with KCC around an infrastructure deal, and East Kent is a real driver for that. So there are lots of discussions going on around driving the economy. So just to provide some reassurance about that. Yes, the £126,000 around the High Street Fund, not a whole hill of beans really when you think about it. We do need to be smart about how we use those funds. And actually this is a case of claiming back as we spend over a period of time, because this is ERDF money. And yes, there are some very prescriptive requirements attached to it, which is quite frustrating because really most of us would have liked a bit more freedom about how we could apply that funding. But it is the nature of the beast. And I want to reassure you that we will try and use it sensibly over a sensible period of time. We're already looking to discuss in due course around phase 2 of that spending to support some of the leisure and hospitality businesses coming back on in the beginning of July. And yeah, we are talking to parish councils. I talk to parish councils once every two weeks. And we are engaged with, I literally had a meeting with them this morning around high streets. Actually, everything seems to be going quite smoothly. But of course, if there are any asks from any of any parts of our district, we're willing to hear them and work with the parish councils on those issues. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. And I will say that I think the input from members, particularly the local knowledge of members, is very useful in the recovery phase in terms of what's going on in local areas. And we're listening, and we'll try and adapt our strategy to meet the things that you tell us, because we can't be everywhere, officers can't be everywhere, and members on the ground are sometimes the best source of information that we've got. So it's been moved and seconded that we note the report. Unless I hear any objection, I will take it as noted. Nobody wants to object to that. So can I thank everybody, officers and members, for their time this evening? And I think it's been we've had a good discussion. That concludes the business for tonight, and I declare the meeting closed at 17:58. I make it. The live stream of this meeting will now end. Thank you.